And welcome back, students, to our final lesson on hardware. Today we are going to discuss output connections. So let's start by first discussing some computer cable connections. There are several types of cabling for a computer. You have display connections, USB, network, audio, power, etc. And this is not everything, but these are just some general common ones. Now, each of these cables have a specialized function that fulfills a role in the computer. So let's start first with the VGA. Now, this is a 15-pin analog display connector. It's also sometimes called a D-sub connector. All right, you probably have seen these pretty often, especially here at the school computers. We still have a lot of VGA. Eventually, VGA might get replaced with something else, but for the current time, VGA is the main connector and it's still being used. Now, the female connector connects the VGA cable to the computer or display, such as a monitor. So when we look here, this right here would be considered the female end, that's the male end, because this is what is going to be connecting the two devices, are these pins here. And if we look, we have 5, 5, 5, so that's how you get the 15 pins. So you have these 3 rows, and then in here, these small little pins you see right here connect into these sockets right here. Now, the VGA cable, shown at the bottom right, helps support resolutions all the way up to about 1080p or higher. However, picture degradation occurs in HDMI and DVR, often superior formats for resolutions at the size. So once you start getting anything really past 720, you really should start really looking at VGA. In fact, VGA is not really designed for the best high quality image. It's because it's an analog signal. Analog signal doesn't do well with the higher resolutions. All right, then we can look at DVI, which is our first digital signal. So DVR, digital video interface, is a digital connector. You have either a 19-pin connector for a single link, or you can have a 25-pin connector for a dual link. And the reason why you'll notice that it's kind of an odd number is because if we look at, for example, these sizes here, you can see in this example right here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 by 3, so that's 24 and 1. Right, so this counts as that final pin, this little slot right here. So that's how we get the 25. So this example right here is a 25-pin connector. Now the female connector connects the DVI cable to the computer or display, such as a monitor. The DVI cable, shown at the bottom right, helps support resolutions up to 1080p or higher. Now, an important thing to note, if it's not a dual link, if it's only single link, it can only support up to 1920 by 1080 pixel. So that's just your standard 1080p resolution. Next, let's discuss HDMI. Now, HDMI, or High Definition Multimedia Interface, is a digital connector that supports both audio and video. Right, they have 19 pins, but they all function differently. Some are for audio, some are for video. The female connector connects the HDMI cable to the computer or the display, such as a monitor. And the HDMI cable, shown at the bottom right, helps support resolutions up to 1080p or higher. The max resolution is at 3,820 by 2,160 pixels at 30 frames per second. However, if you have an HDMI 2.0 port and an HDMI 2.0 cable, you can actually get the same resolution, which processes at 60 frames per second. So if you're just watching, for example, television, most television things don't hit more than 30 frames per second, so you're fine. But if you're doing maybe something like gaming, then you may want to look at 60 frames per second, or look at our next kind of interface, which is DisplayPort. DisplayPort, or DP, is a digital connector that is designed to replace both VGA and DVI. Because even though DVI is a good connection, it's not quite as good as some of the newer ones. Right, now, with this one, there's 20 pins here on a DisplayPort connector, but they all function a little differently. The female connector connects the DP cable to a computer or display, such as a monitor, and the DP cable, shown at the bottom right, helps support resolutions up to 1080p or higher. So again, you'll notice that these all kind of have a similar resolution support. However, they all kind of function differently. So this one right here, with the latest standard of DisplayPort, supports up to a theoretical 8K resolution display, which is 7,680 pixels by 4,320 pixels. So it's much, much more powerful than the current standard of HDMI. All right, next we're going to just really briefly talk about the PS2 connector. If you recall, I said this is in the past has been replaced by USB. And the reason is it's not really as common, but it's good to know in case you encounter this on an older machine or just a machine that happens to have a PS2 connector. Right. The purple PS2 connector is for your keyboard, and the green PS2 connector is for your mouse. Right. Now you can't just take any old like USB one and just plug it in there. You'd have to have either a adapter that would adapt from one connection to the other, or you'd have to have a specifically that kind of connection. Now, the connector and the cabling are shown at right, and we go on to our networking cable, or the Ethernet cable, which is our most common one. Now, this is also known as the RJ45 cable. This connector uses twisted pairs of copper cabling to provide network communication from the computer to the network. One end will connect to the computer, and the other end to the switch, router, or RJ45 wall port. We're not going to get so much into the exact specifications of the cabling here. However, do note that in regards to that, most Ethernet cabling today is either going to be using Cat5e or Cat6 or 6a. You won't see as much some of the older cabling standards like Cat3 because a lot of that stuff, unless you're actually working in networking where you have to either replace it or just manage it, you're probably not going to encounter it on a day-to-day basis. Next is the 3.5 millimeter audio jack. Right. This is an audio cable that connects speakers and headphones to the computer. Connectors on a computer can vary, but are generally color-coded. Green is for speakers or headphones. Pink is for a microphone. Blue is for line in. This is used to record and play sounds from devices such as MP3 players or instruments. Now there are other connections that can exist, as noticed here in this example. You can see that we have some other color codes that also can fulfill other audio related inputs. Alright, next up is the USB. Now there exist two main types of USB standards in use today. There's 2.0 and 3.0. 3.0 is much faster, and by much faster I mean extremely faster. You should look up and see just how much faster USB 3.0 is to 2.0. And as such, you should use it whenever possible. As if you have a USB 2.0 device, you're not really going to gain any benefit out of a USB 3.0 port. But a lot of USB 3.0 devices are backwards compatible. As noticed here, don't worry about connecting a 2.0 device. In 3.0, it's backwards compatible. But a 3.0 device, you'll want to plug into a 3.0 port because the 2.0 doesn't have the connection speed that would be required. Now, how you can tell the difference between the two is that USB 3.0 is a blue tip connector, and 2.0 is black. So if I look up here, I have a USB 2.0. You can see it's black, and this one's blue, which means it's USB 3.0. Similarly down here, if we look at the different standards, there's different kind of ports that plug in, such as USB-A, USB micro, etc. that exist to connect certain devices. So, like for example, this is the USB 2.0 standard A. That's just your standard USB, such as like when we think about a flash drive, that's USB. This is what you'll see, either 2.0 standard, or you might see like the 3.1 standard that's shown right here. You'll also see right here is USB 2.0 micro, or here is a USB 3.0 micro B. So there's a whole bunch of different pin styles you'll see here. This is not all of them. This is just a representation of a couple different USB styles that exist. Okay. Last one is power, because let's just face it, you can't have a machine turn on without power cabling. So most desktops and some computer devices connect with a standardized power cable, which is the one shown right here. Now laptops, tablets, and other devices will often use specialized chargers and cables to convert the AC power to the appropriate DC power for the machine. That's why you can't just take the standard power cable and plug it into a laptop, because it's not going to use just that direct power, because a lot of times this cable simply just supplies wall power. Then it goes into the power supply, which does the conversion. In a laptop, you don't have that giant power supply to do the conversion, so instead it happens in the charging cable, for example. Now, cables with 3 prongs are, you have your 2 live wires, and you also have a ground connector. Now, if the ground breaks off, like let's say right here on this port here, because you have your 2 prongs and your ground, if the ground breaks off, you really should replace that cable, as it's generally unsafe to use the machines without it. Yes, you can operate without a ground, but just like with anything electrical, if that grounding is not there and it's designed to have a ground, you really should replace that cable to be able to have one. That concludes our notes for today, folks. Until next time.